In the second quarter of 2026, a silent crisis is unfolding across the landscape of modern finance. While the headlines talk about stock market rallies and the latest digital gold rushes, a more sinister reality is being ignored by the masses. You have been fed a diet of financial comfort food, told that if you just save your pennies, skip your morning latte, and dutifully deposit $100 a month into a diversified portfolio, you will eventually wake up wealthy. But today, we are pulling back the curtain on the great lie of the middle class. If your total net worth is currently sitting under $20,000, everything you think you know about compound interest is not only wrong, it is dangerous. The truth is, the financial system is governed by a set of invisible laws that behave very much like the physics of our universe. In the world of wealth, money has its own form of gravity. And right now, most of you are trapped in the thickest part of the atmosphere, where the air is thin and the weight of existence is crushing. To leave the ground, a rocket must burn 90% of its fuel just to reach the first few miles of altitude. This is what the elite call financial escape velocity. Without it, no matter how hard you work or how much coffee you skip, the gravitational pull of your bills, your debt, and the relentless erosion of inflation in 2026 will eventually drag you back down to earth. You are not building a fortune. You are fighting for oxygen in a vacuum that is designed to keep you breathless. Today, we are investigating the secret math of the 1% and why the first $20,000 is the only milestone that actually matters. Welcome to the poverty loop, and this is how you break the chains.
Educational and historical content only, not financial advice.
To understand why you are stuck, we must first look at the cold, hard, mathematical reality of the financial black hole. Most financial gurus love to show you charts of exponential growth, starting from $1 and ending at 10 million. But they conveniently leave out the first 2 decades of that journey. When you have $500 or even $5,000, and you manage to earn a 10% return, you have made $500 in a year. While that sounds like a success on paper, in the real world of 2026, $500 does not even cover a single month of groceries for a small family. This is the invisibility phase of compounding. At low levels of capital, the gains are so small that they are completely swallowed by the friction of daily life. Think of your wealth as a signal and your expenses as noise. When your signal is weak, the noise of a car repair, a medical bill, or a simple rent increase drowns everything out. You are not experiencing growth. You are experiencing a slow, agonizing evaporation of your effort. Meanwhile, the elite understand that compounding only begins to have a physical presence in your life once the returns can actually pay for your survival. If you have $1 million, that same 10% return gives you $100,000 a year. That is a life-changing salary generated by doing nothing. But when you are under the $20,000 mark, you are essentially trying to start a fire by rubbing 2 damp sticks together while standing in a rainstorm. The rain, in this case, is inflation. In 2026, the purchasing power of the dollar is melting away faster than most people can save it. If you save 5%, but inflation is 7%, you are not getting richer. You are just getting poorer more slowly than your neighbor. This is the gravity of the black hole. It is a mathematical trap that relies on your inability to see the bigger picture. They tell you to diversify, but diversification for someone with $3,000 is just a way to ensure you stay average and broke. The wealthy do not diversify to get rich. They concentrate to break the gravity, and only diversify once they have reached the safety of the upper atmosphere. By spreading your tiny amount of capital across 30 different stocks, you are effectively ensuring that no single win can ever be large enough to move the needle of your life. This is exactly where the system wants you to stay, distracted by small wins and fractional percentages while you lose the war of attrition. You are told that slow and steady wins the race. But in a race against a mounting pile of debt and a devaluing currency, slow and steady just means you are the last person to realize you have already lost. The math of the 1% is not about being smart. It is about being heavy. Until you have the mass, the weight of $20,000 behind you, the laws of financial physics will continue to work against you, dragging your dreams back down into the dark. In the world of investigative finance, there is a concept known as the Vimes Boots Theory of socioeconomic unfairness. It was originally a piece of fiction, but in 2026, it has become a brutal reality for the millions trapped below the $20,000 line. The theory is simple. A wealthy individual can spend $50 on a pair of quality boots that will last them 10 years. But a person who can only afford $10 for a pair of cheap boots will find they wear out in a single season. Over those same 10 years, the poor person has spent $100 on boots and still has wet feet, while the wealthy person has spent $50 and has dry feet. Being poor, as it turns out, is incredibly expensive. In 2026, this concept is no longer just about footwear. It is about every single transaction in your life. When you do not have a safety net of $20,000, you are forced to pay the poor tax on almost everything. You buy the older, cheaper car that breaks down every 3 months. You pay for the small, overpriced packages of food because you cannot afford the bulk savings at the warehouse club. And you pay the highest interest rates because the banking system views your lack of capital as a high risk. While the 1% are using their mass to buy efficiency and durability, you are spending your limited fuel just to maintain a broken status quo. This is where the math of compounding is truly murdered. Every time your cheap car needs a $500 repair, that is $500 that never makes it into your investment account. Every time you pay a late fee because your cash flow was tight for 48 hours, that is capital that will never experience the eighth wonder of the world. You're not just losing money, you are losing time. You are losing the years where your money should have been working for you. But instead, it is being sacrificed to the gods of maintenance and inefficiency. The system is designed to ensure that those without weight stay light, staying just a few $100s away from a disaster that resets their progress back to zero. They keep you focused on the tiny savings, the coupons, and the discounts, while the structural cost of being broke bleeds you dry from 1,000 cuts. To escape the gravity of the poverty loop, you must realize that you cannot save your way out with wet feet. You must find a way to secure the heavy boots, the $20,000 shield that finally stops the bleeding. To truly understand the game, we must look back at the 1929 crash, the moment when the middle class was wiped out and the elite solidified their power for the next century. While the history books tell you about the breadlines and the suicides on Wall Street, the investigative records tell a different story of the 1%. Families like the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds did not survive the 1929 collapse because they had a good savings rate. They survived because they understood the law of mass. In the years leading up to the Great Depression, these dynasties were not focused on the slow, grinding magic of interest on small sums. They were focused on what economists call primitive accumulation. They were seizing control of the infrastructure of the world: oil, banking, and steel. When the crash happened, they were not holding paper assets that evaporated into thin air. They were holding the physical reality of the economy. While the average investor was watching their life savings of $500 turn into zero, the Rockefellers were using their war chests to buy entire industries for pennies on the dollar. This is the secret they do not want you to find in your textbooks. The elite do not wait for the snowball to start rolling. They build the mountain. They understood that you cannot compound from zero during a storm. You must have a foundation that is heavy enough to withstand the wind. The Rothschilds built their fortune by being the first to have the information and the first to have the gold to back it up. They knew that in times of crisis, liquidity is king and mass is the only shield. By the time 1930 rolled around, the winners of the Depression were those who had crossed the threshold of survival long before the first bank failed. They were not playing the game of percentages. They were playing the game of ownership. They realized that 10% of nothing is still nothing, but owning the source of the 10% is everything. If you are entering the challenges of 2026 with the mindset of a 1929 victim, waiting for the system to reward your patience, you are already in danger. You must like a dynasty in waiting, prioritizing the accumulation of the first $20,000 as if it were your only ticket onto the lifeboat. Because in the history of wealth, it usually is. Behind the glass towers of the financial district, there is a reason why every high school curriculum and every retail banking app is obsessed with teaching you the magic of small savings. They call it financial literacy. But in the circles of the 1%, it is known as the distraction of the masses. The Matrix wants you to believe that your path to freedom is paved with $10 contributions and the patient accumulation of interest. Because as long as you are waiting for a miracle 30 years in the future, you are a predictable, compliant, and profitable cog in their machine. The investigative truth is that the banking system does not want you to reach $20,000 quickly. Because once you have mass, you become a threat to their business model. They need your small deposits, your $500 here and your $1,000 there, to fuel the engine of fractional reserve banking. For every $1 you leave sitting in a savings account, the bank can lend out $10 or sometimes even $100 to the elite. They are using your small, stagnant capital to provide the massive loans that allow the 1% to buy the very apartment buildings you live in and the companies you work for. You are essentially providing the ammunition for your own financial capture. In 2026, this manipulation has reached a fever pitch. While they encourage you to be patient and watch your pennies, the elite are moving at the speed of light, using debt and high leverage to seize assets before inflation destroys the value of the currency. The system tells you that debt is dangerous, and for the poor. But for the wealthy, debt is a tool used to bypass the slow grind of compounding. They are not waiting for 10% returns. They are using your deposits to create 1,000% gains in the real economy. This is the central paradox of the Matrix. They teach you to play the long game while they play the fast game. They encourage you to diversify into paper assets that they control, ensuring that your wealth is always within their reach, easily taxed, easily monitored, and easily eroded by the monetary policies of the central banks. By keeping you focused on the tiny percentages and the distant promise of retirement, they ensure you never gather enough fuel to ignite the engine of true independence. They want you just wealthy enough to be a good consumer, but never heavy enough to stop being a servant to the debt cycle. The moment you decide to ignore their advice, to stop playing the game of small numbers, and start obsessing over the physics of mass, is the moment you become a glitch in their system. The elite do not want you to cross that $20,000 threshold, because once you do, you start playing by their rules. And that is the one thing the house can never allow. Why $20,000? Why is this specific number the magic key to the fortress, the gateway that the elite never want you to find? To understand the significance of this threshold, we must look at the tipping point where the laws of financial physics actually begin to reverse. For most of your journey, you have been pushing a heavy boulder up a steep hill, sweating for every inch of progress while the weight of the system tries to crush you. But at $20,000, you reach the crest. And for the first time, the boulder begins to move on its own. In the investigation of wealth, we find that $20,000 is the minimum mass required to achieve a measurable signal over the constant noise of existence. When you have $2,000, a 10% gain is $200, a sum so small it disappears into a single utility bill. But at $20,000, with that same 10% gain is $2,000. In 2026, $2,000 is a month of rent. It is a meaningful shield. It is the moment when the money you earn from your money begins to rival the money you save from your labor. This is the crossover point, the beginning of the end for the poverty loop. But the magic of $20,000 is not just about the math. It is about the access. In the current economic landscape, those with less than $20,000 are treated as consumers to be harvested. But once you cross that line, the system begins to view you as a participant to be courted. You gain access to high-yield instruments that are invisible to the small saver. You have the collateral to negotiate better terms. And most importantly, you gain the luxury of patience. The 1% do not win because they are faster. They win because they can wait. And $20,000 is the price of admission to the waiting room. Think of this amount as your first unit of financial armor. Without it, every minor economic tremor in 2026 feels like an earthquake. A flat tire is a tragedy. A dental emergency is a debt trap. But with $20,000, these are merely inconveniences. You have moved from a state of constant reaction to a state of strategic action. You are no longer a leaf in the wind. You have gained enough mass to have your own trajectory. This is why the banks and the gurus keep you focused on the pennies. They know that if you ever gather $20,000 in one place, you will stop needing them. You will stop paying their fees, and you will start competing for their assets. Crossing this line is the most dangerous thing you can do to the status quo. Because it is the moment you stop being a battery for the matrix and start being the architect of your own reality. It is the absolute minimum velocity required to escape the crushing gravity of the working class. And once you reach it, the view of the horizon changes forever. Now that we have identified the invisible chains, we must discuss the blueprint for your escape. And it is not what the gurus, the teachers, or the banks have been telling you. If you are currently spending your valuable mental energy trying to save $5 on a sandwich or searching for a cheaper brand of laundry detergent, you are committing financial suicide by 1,000 small decisions. You are wasting the cognitive bandwidth required to solve the only problem that matters: how to reach $20,000 in the shortest time frame possible during the second quarter of 2026 in the world of the 1%. The path to freedom is not through austerity. It is through leverage and the acquisition of high-value skills that the current market is desperate to pay for. While the average person is waiting for a 3% raise at their dead-end job, the architect of their own wealth is looking for the massive imbalances in the 1926 economy. They are looking for the problems that the wealthy are willing to pay $20,000 to solve today, not 30 years from now. The strategy for breaking the chains relies on a total pivot from a defensive mindset to an offensive one. Stop asking how you can save more and start asking how you can be worth more to a high-stakes environment. In the volatile landscape of 2026, companies and high-net-worth individuals are not looking for more employees. They are looking for fixers. They are looking for people who can navigate the complex tax laws, the shifting energy markets, and the digital infrastructure that the rest of the world is too afraid to touch. If you have $5,000 right now, do not put it into a diversified index fund and wait for it to grow to $5,500 by next year. That is a waste of time and mass. Instead, invest that capital into yourself to acquire a skill that allows you to charge $100 or $200 an hour. When your hourly rate increases, your ability to gather the $20,000 shield accelerates exponentially. You are no longer trying to fill a bucket with a dropper. You are turning on the fire hose. This is the secret of the Rothschild strategy that is never discussed in public. They did not start by being careful with their pennies. They started by positioning themselves at the center of the most valuable information and transactions of their time. They realized that once you have the first 20,000, or in their case, the first million, the rules of the game change in your favor. Your labor is no longer the primary engine of your growth. Your capital becomes the engine. To reach this milestone in the second quarter of 2026, you must ignore the noise of the headlines and focus on one single objective: the relentless accumulation of mass. Forget about your lifestyle. Forget about looking successful to people who are just as broke as you are. The elite do not care about looking rich. They care about being heavy. They care about having enough velocity to leave the poverty loop behind forever. Once you decide that the $20,000 mark is your only priority, the matrix loses its power over you. You stop being a consumer and you start being a predator in the financial jungle. And very soon, you will find that the air at the top of the atmosphere is far clearer than you ever imagined. As you navigate the remaining months of 2026, reaching the $20,000 milestone is only the beginning of your journey. The second challenge, and perhaps the more difficult one, is protecting that mass from the predatory forces of a shifting economy. Once you have escaped the initial gravity of the poverty loop, the matrix will try to reel you back in through the most subtle of traps: lifestyle inflation. The system is designed to detect your success and immediately offer you ways to spend it. It will tempt you with the better lease, the newer phone, or the hollow status of a luxury vacation. But you must remain disciplined, because in the second half of 2026, your mass is your only true security. The survival map for 2026 requires you to treat your $20,000 as a sacred seed, not as a spending fund. You must move your capital into assets that have physical weight and historical resilience. Look at the patterns of the elite in previous cycles of inflation. They do not leave their wealth in stagnant cash where it can be liquidated by a central bank's keyboard stroke. They position themselves in land, in high-demand commodities, and in private equity that generates real value in the real world. Your goal in the coming months is to continue adding to your mass while shifting into defensive positions that can withstand the turbulence of the 2026 market crash. Remember that the elite win because they do not panic, and they do not panic because they have the mass to absorb the shock, while the rest of the world is reacting to the daily fluctuations of the headlines. You must be looking at the horizon of 2027 and 2028. Your $20,000 is the foundation of a fortress that will protect you from the wealth transfer that is currently taking place. The middle class is being systematically hollowed out through the hidden tax of inflation. But for those who have reached escape velocity, this period represents the greatest accumulation opportunity in a century. As the currency continues to lose its grip, your focus must remain on the physics of ownership. Keep your expenses low, keep your skills high, and keep your capital heavy. The survival of your financial future depends on your ability to ignore the noise and follow the math. The gravity of the old world is fading, and for those with the weight to reach the stars, the opportunities in the second half of 2026 are infinite. You have worked too hard to reach this altitude to let a moment of weakness drag you back down. Stay focused, stay heavy, and stay free. The journey to financial freedom is not a straight line. It is a series of breakthroughs and plateaus. And the most dangerous plateau you will ever face is the one you are standing on right now. Beneath the $20,000 line, we have seen how the math is rigged, how the gravity of the poverty loop is designed to exhaust you, and how the elite use the history of 1929 and the chaos of 2026 to consolidate their own mass while you are distracted by pennies. But now, you have the investigative truth. You know that the magic of compound interest is a hollow promise until you gather the weight required to make it real. You know that your only mission in this second quarter is to stop playing defense and start playing offense. Your $20,000 shield is not just a bank balance. It is your declaration of independence from a system that views you as a battery. It is the moment you stop asking for permission and start dictating your own terms to the market. As we move further into the uncertainties of 2026, remember that wealth is not a matter of luck. It is a matter of physics. The higher you climb, the thinner the atmosphere of competition becomes, and the easier it is to stay in orbit. The gravity that tries to pull you down today will one day be the force that keeps your empire stable. But first, you must reach the threshold. You must burn the fuel, and you must never look back. If you found this investigation valuable, and you are ready to master the hidden math of the 1%, then join us here at Mindset for Wealth. We are dedicated to uncovering the secrets of money history and providing you with the blueprints to survive and thrive in the coming wealth transfer. Click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the strategies of the world's most powerful families. Thank you for watching. Stay focused, stay heavy, and we will see you at escape velocity.